Get started. So, hello everyone, officially once more. Welcome to this evening's webinar. We just lost our main speaker. Hopefully, she will be dropping back into the Zoom meeting in a moment. My name is Katrin Heuser. I'm the director of Little Yoga Space in Lisbon, and always very much enjoying hosting these free webinars with our various teachers and therapists and facilitators. And today I'm really excited to speak to Myrthe Peters, who has only recently started to share her amazing work at the studio. So it's also a kind of little introduction to her for those of you who haven't met her yet or don't know her. And I'm also particularly excited, almost seems like an odd word in the context of the topic of the talk today, but I'm really excited to have Myrthe share her work at the space, which I think is so important and not always so available. She is a birth, but also end-of-life doula. And that's really where her main passion lies, creating that space to support people in that really important stage that is part of life. So hello, first of all. If you, Myrthe, you will need to unmute yourself, yes, to join. I'm going to hand over to you. You can probably introduce yourself much better. And I'm quite sure that first thing everybody is really keen to know what an end-of-life doula actually does. I'm quite sure some people might not have even heard of that it even exists.
Yeah, so first of all, thank you so much for hosting this for everyone. I am always really happy when I can talk about this topic, and not just because I am so fascinated by it, but also because it's so important. And I loved how you just mentioned this important part of our lives, right? Because so often people don't necessarily think of the end of our lives and death as it being a full chapter of our lives, whereas it actually is. And in my work, it's really important to me to offer people that different perspective to it. So, as you said, I am an end-of-life doula. I also did the birth training, but we're focusing tonight on the end of life. A doula is really, it means person of service. So I guess in a sense, we're all doulas. It comes from it has a Greek origin, the word. And as an end-of-life doula, we have a non-medical role and we offer holistic support at the end of life. So think about practical, spiritual, and emotional support. And that can be at various stages. It can be when people are planning for the end of life, which is something hugely important. And surprise, we do not need to be dying for that. Really, all of us should be thinking about having an end of life plan. And we'll talk more about this in a few minutes. Also guiding people through the active dying stage. So when someone has had a terminal diagnosis, it can be a huge comfort to have a person by your side who is not scared or feels uncomfortable with really intense emotions, because it's a highly emotional time, right? And to have someone from the outside kind of guide that can be a real comfort. And then obviously, once someone has died, that's not the end. There is then a whole grieving process for the people who are left behind that follows. So grief is a huge part of it as well. And I find that, and this is also the reason why I reached out to you to start doing the groups at your space, is because death and dying and grief and loss, it's really not a big thing in our society. It's not practiced. It's not visible to us, right? People are not really demonstrating in a broader sense how we can do this. And there are various reasons for that. For example, the medicalization. So we have hospitals nowadays, which is incredible. And we need them, right? We need them. And there is a huge gap there in offering medical support and then making that transition to, hey, someone is really coming to the end of their lives and they need something other or in addition to the medical treatment. And as doulas, we really try to fill that gap. We also have a role of advocacy there, and ensuring that the whole teams and the families, they're all on the same page and relaying information, because it's can be such an intense time. It is sometimes really useful to have someone who can ask clarifying questions, make sure that you understand, that you have all the information to make an informed decision about what comes next. So medicalization is a huge part, a big reason that we don't really talk about death and dying and grief and loss, because really when we go to a hospital, we go there to get better, and dying is a conversation that many doctors don't want to have also. And this is what's come out of research. It's because for people with a medical background, hope is very much related to that. So when a patient would get a terminal diagnosis and they would actually say that, it could mean that they take away the hope of the patient living longer. And they don't want to take away the hope. And I understand that. And it brings with it a lot of challenges, because the person is going to die, the patient is going to die. So that's one. And then also why it's not really visible in our society is because we've really taken it indoors. It's not a community experience anymore in our dominant West. So back in the day, this was a big family gathering. It was something that the village would support with. And because of the changing dynamics in our society and us becoming more and more on our own beings, this is not really demonstrated outwards. And that also has a reflection on how children experience death and dying in the family. And that's maybe a conversation for a whole other time. So those are two really big questions. So I guess interesting, there are so many statistics about how people want to die and how it doesn't happen. And one of them is actually that around 80% of people want to die at home, and only 14% of people actually do. That's a huge difference, right? From 80% who want to 14% who get it. And when we think about that last chapter of our lives, it can be a hugely transformational experience, and it's a really sacred experience, and it's one that people will always remember. So talking about preferences and wishes and how you would like in an ideal world to spend your final moments is really important. And not just to have that conversation with yourself, but also to have that conversation with the people around you. those are tricky conversations. Like, they are hard because we are scared. We avoid the topic because it's an unknown territory, right? And when something is unknown, for most of us, it causes fear. I know for me, like in certain areas of my life, I'm very much a control freak. And when I don't have it, I experience fear. So to have that at the end of life, that can be extremely overwhelming. So then avoiding it is maybe the best option in that moment. But when you come to it and decisions have to be made, it can cause a lot of additional stress. Emotions are high. Sometimes there's not much time to make decisions. And in some instances, you will have to make a decision for someone else, for a loved one who can't communicate. And if you don't know what they want, what their wish is, how are you going to make that decision without wondering for the rest of your lives, did I make the right one? So it is hugely important to start talking about this. And there are different ways to do that. And also it can be really fun. Like, it is a heavy topic, absolutely. And death and dying and grief and loss, it's really complicated and it is difficult and messy, right? It's all of that. And it can also be an amazing opportunity to actually connect with the people around you, because what research has found as well is that the more we talk about these topics, the closer we get to the people around us. So seeing it as an opportunity for connection and deepening of relationships, how can we say no to that? How can we shut the door on that, right? And it comes back to us having a vulnerable attitude towards life, ourselves, towards the people around us. And yeah, it takes massive courage to start exploring that. So conversation is really the way in. About conversation, and this is how we got to know each other, and this is one of the parts of my work that I offer to the community, is to actually offer an opportunity, an experience to have a conversation with people who can be from any walk of life. They can be grieving, they may be dying. Well, we're all dying. I mean, as soon as we're born, we are dying, right? People come to the groups who might be really scared of death, people who are actually really fascinated by it, people who work in the field. So it's a beautiful opportunity to hear different perspectives, stories, and to become familiar with the options that we have. Because once we know our options, right, there is so much going on in this space and so much is in development that we don't know about if we don't talk about it. And to be able to make an informed decision about one of the most sacred moments of our lives, it would be really good if we have all the information that we need to really connect to how we envision that for ourselves and for the people around us. So I love hosting these groups. They are always different and they are such an inspiration to me as well, because I hear different stories. I never really know what is going to come up. So it's as much a learning for me as it is for the people who attend. And it can be really, really fun. And also there is that element of intimacy and connection, right? And that's a really good practice to then take that into your own circle and to start exploring your own end-of-life plan? And have you thought about whether you want to be resuscitated or want to be fed through a tube or breathe through a ventilator? And if you do or don't, have you put that into writing? And have you told someone who you trust where they can find that information if you cannot tell a doctor where that is? And it's also about exploring the spiritual side, right? It's about exploring a ritual, because it's so much more than just practical stuff. And it's really about exploring your own personal values. And it's a beautiful opportunity to kind of dig into that and to start pondering on some of these important questions. And I would actually love to kind of open this up to the people who are here, because I mean, I can talk about this for a really long time, but that's not a conversation. So yeah, I'm really curious if someone here has any specific questions, or maybe you have a specific story that you would like to share.
Oh, while everybody is thinking about that, remember you could put that
I have a question. Sorry.
the chat. Yeah, Heather, go ahead.
Sorry. My only experience, sorry, do you say your name Myrthe?
Myrthe, yes.
Myrthe. My only experience with a doula, and again, I apologize about my camera, is on the birth side of things. And in that case, I felt, that the role of a doula, which I loved, was advocating for choices, as you mentioned, and, supporting the birth giver as she goes through the experience in the hospital where your wishes aren't always respected and everything you mentioned. I'm curious with the end of life doula, in part because I had an aunt who just died in the hospital when her strong wish had been to die at home, but she became too weak in the hospital in her last days to be moved. So that was just the situation that kind of inspired me to sign up for this talk. But I'm curious how much of the end of life doula role actually involves sort of preparing I guess it's similar with the birth doula, but preparing the actual person, apart from advocating for their wishes and how to die, preparing the person to go. And I'm curious, in a non perverse way, to hear some of how it feels to be with someone at the end of their life, and how much of your role is helping them go and let go and all of that.
Mm-hmm. First of all, it's really sad that your aunt had a wish and that didn't happen for her. So yeah, just want to acknowledge that. So as an end-of-life doula, it's really about facilitating the necessary conversation for someone to be able to let go and to bring comfort. So comfort can be offered in different ways. It can be through touch, it can be through senses, bringing in the senses in the environment, creating an environment where someone feels like they can actually relax, because dying can be really, really hard work. Like, it can also be a really physical thing, right? And some terminal people, they can even experience like a particular type of agitation, and there's a lot of discomfort that comes with that. So as a doula, we try to contribute to an environment that brings in that peace and that comfort. And again, we go back to the conversation. if someone is really still in their head and they have unresolved stuff, that needs to come out. But if they don't have the tools because they're working so hard to kind of unpick what is going on, then we can help with that. There's obviously also family dynamics. Those are not always easy. Say, for example, some family members can be in denial. Other people can be really embracing of the opportunity to create the most comfortable atmosphere and really nurture those final moments. And it is important to realize that each experience is unique. Like, there is no manual for this, which makes it very interesting and very beautiful, right? Because we really work with the person, and it's not, okay, let's get my handbook out and tick off all these boxes when it comes to, providing comfort and emotional and spiritual support. Death and grief, they are as unique as a fingerprint is. And it's up to us to really unpick what a person's values are, what they find important, who they find important to. But the word comfort keeps coming back. Like, it's so much about offering comfort and making sure that the person can release as much as possible before they pass.
Thank you. You really heard my question. You really answered it exactly as I had hoped. But just, sorry, part B of the question is, how much do drugs, because part of the reason and thank you for your sympathy about my aunt, that she was too weak, is because they had given her so much morphine and tried to try some experimental treatments at the end, which probably weren't going to work. So she was weakened by the treatments and then on so much morphine that she couldn't speak clearly. How much do you struggle against that in the last hours?
I mean, when it's simply impossible to move someone from their final spot, because if we do, then they might die on the way. That is such a hard place to be. And this is also, again, how we go back to the planning. Knowing for yourself whether or not you want to have clinical treatment or not. We know that when doctors use the term clinical, that it means that there is nothing else that can be done to prolong your life, right? It is an experimental thing. And having those wishes properly documented and bringing them up in a timely manner, and not right at the end when suddenly this whole process is speeding up, right? Because sometimes that can happen when someone gets a terminal diagnosis and suddenly this active dying process, it really speeds up. It can last from somewhere between 2 weeks to 2 days, and we don't know how long. And to make sure that someone actually gets home, there needs to be a support system in place. So the statistic is that when someone wants to die at home, we need 16 people hands-on to make that happen. So when you think about that, 16 people, that takes time to arrange. So really, before the active dying stage occurs, we already need to have a plan for that. We already need to have our people in a picture. They need to know that we can call them. So preparation is a big thing. So planning and conversation, it very much comes back to that. And there is so many people who get surprised by this and who are really pressured by time and they don't make it home. And that is really, really sad, because what we want for people is is for them to die the way that they envision.
Thank you, Myrthe.
Is there anyone else with a question?
Something that just strikes me in terms of the importance of this conversation is for it just seems almost like this really fundamental educational piece that should just be part of, well, just at some point your education, just like you educate yourself about your cycle or about, birth, if you were to give birth, or how you educate yourself about, or just anything you do in life, and that is part of life, where you realize actually it's just really helpful to know more about this, and to do that really almost, what I would say, just kind of now, when maybe death or dying is not imminent in your own case or somebody close to you. So you're actually also, in a kind of, in a kind of more steady place to really have these meaningful conversations, to have the time to also let that sink in and resonate, and think about it. What would be the ideal situation, and kind of be in a braver space in the beginning to have the conversations. And if people started to talk about this a lot more in general, if this was just, then the stigma, the fear of talking about it, all of that would just begin to fall away, because this seems definitely a cultural issue also.
Yeah, it definitely is. And actually, it can sound so counterintuitive, but the more we talk about this, and the more we become aware of what we would like. And side note, we make plans change, they're meant to change, right? We can build in an annual review day, and we go over our paperwork and we go, okay, does this still resonate? How about my relationship with this person? Has that changed significantly? And do I maybe need to speak to someone else who is going to have access to my passwords? Something very simple. But plans change, and they can change at all times because you are in control, right? And when we make a plan and when we start discovering all of this, it actually means that we take back a little bit of the control at the end, which is such a big piece of the unknown. But we have a sense of control. And once we own up to that, then we actually start to live fuller in the here and the now. And one of the top regrets at the end of life that keep coming back is, the use of time and worrying and working and not spending enough time with the people around us and expressing how we feel. Well, how we feel about death is a really big part of how we live our lives. So it's, I feel like my work is so much an invitation about, exploring that. And of course, this is in no way to say that this is not hard or difficult, or that stuff can get really challenging and that people get sick and there is unpredictability. That is all there too. It's all there too. And we can work with that, but not if we are not open to having the conversation.
I have a question. Sorry, I saw that Joanne also left a message. I was just wondering, are you also supporting young people dying, for example, of cancer? And is it the same care that you provide to this kind of audience versus like more elderly audience? Because, I don't know, I was wondering if it's the same thing, because obviously it's something terrible to admit and to accept. And are you also supporting the family and the people around the people who die young? I mean, yeah, is there a difference between this audience and more like elderly people? I was just wondering.
Yeah, that's a good question. And there is definitely a difference. You'd have conversations of a different nature, right? With someone who is, say, well into their 80s and someone who's maybe 13 or 14. I have not worked with younger people who are terminally ill. I'm currently working with someone who tried to take their own life. And that is also a very different conversation, language-wise, I'm having with them, right? Because, and it's also a very different topic, but the type of language I use in this space is very different than how I would interact with an elderly person. I do believe that end-of-life doulas would bring such big benefits to the space where younger people and children are dying, because it is incredibly different, and it's really, really hard as a parent to have to let go of your child, right? That's an absolute nightmare. So to have someone there who can navigate those emotions, and I'm not saying that we are not affected by it, because of course we are. However, we are not uncomfortable with the intensity of the situation, and the intensity of the situation can be quite different when it comes to young people and children. Does that answer your question, Marion?
Yes, thank you, Myrthe. Thanks.
So we have a question also in the chat. As a control freak myself, I find death extremely scary. And as you said, it is something unknown. You mentioned spirituality a few times. Can you explain more about how that can play a role in the end of life?
Yes. So when I refer to spirituality, it's really about meaning and how we find meaning and how we have found meaning in our lives. And a big part of spirituality is connecting to something that's bigger than ourselves. So to be able to bring that in can be really beautiful and really comforting. And that can have many shapes, looks. It can also include, for example, Reiki treatments. It can also include putting on essential oils, or having some crystals nearby, or bringing a spirit animal in, or reading poetry. Spirituality can mean a variety of things, and it's also really about, what does spirituality mean to you? It's not about what spirituality is for me, right? I have my spiritual practice, and I know how I would like to have spiritual elements at the end of my life. And that is completely different to all of you, right? Because we all have our own practice, or we don't have practice, but that doesn't mean that we can't explore that and still bring that in as a way of comfort, as a way to bring meaning, as a way to perhaps connect to a part of yourself that you didn't know existed. I hope that answers your question, Joan.
Yeah, thank you. Does anybody else have a question? You can put this in the chat or unmute yourself.
I know this is a tough thing to answer, Myrthe, but with all your experience in the field, do you have any recommendations for how to, things we can do during our lifetime, apart from the planning and speaking with everyone that we trust about our plans, to prepare ourselves in a way, not that it's imminent, I hope, but just to, are there meditations that you do, or?
Yeah, there is, and actually this is also beautiful for people who are particularly scared about death. There are death meditations, and I'm currently doing a training in this, and I will be offering death meditations one-to-one, probably beginning of next year. So we go through different topics to gain a better understanding of what the body does when we talk about this, and when we listen to specific comments. So definitely for me, exploring that in a meditative state is really beautiful. And I guess it's also really interesting to start journaling about this. So you can ask yourself the same inquiry a couple of times in a row on different days, because you'll likely have different answers. After this, I can share some prompts if that is desired. I'd be happy to do that. So journaling can be great. Those are the two big things that come to mind right now.
Great, thank you. In a way, I feel like until we've worked out our giant baggage that we all have to work out, it's hard not to be terrified of death. So maybe it's a larger question as far as, you can't tell me the answer of how to work out all my baggage.
No, I can't. And really, it's as a doula, we are not meant to, we're meant to guide, right? I would never come in and give you advice on what you should do. I give you your options, and through conversation, you will connect to what resonates most. And then you will work with that particular option, with that choice. You will make that choice. So, and as I said, that can change over time, right? It's not set in stone. It really is not. And that's, I suppose, also the beauty of it, because the more we become, connected to this, we have new experiences, and then we get to recalibrate again. So it is also really, it is a type of inner work, I would say, type of inner work and inner growth, which is beautiful.
We have another question here in the chat. Do you believe in something after life? And I guess that kind of leads to the question, in a way, whether you as the doula might kind of remain neutral within the belief systems that are out there, because I'm assuming that people that you work with might have all different kinds of belief systems. And, you will believe in something, I guess. And, do you share that also with the people that you work with, your perspective on what happens after?
Yeah, it's a good question. Personally, I do believe in something after life. And that brings me a lot of comfort. In my work, it's not my place to share my beliefs with anyone. It's not, because it's not about me, right? It's not about me trying to give that type of information. If someone asks me, that's a completely different question, and it would happen in conversation. But it's never part of our practice to go in and say, right, I believe in the universe, and the universe does this, that, and the other for me. You should really give it a go. And I'm saying this quite bluntly, but that is basically how we really try to, no, we don't try to, like, we stay very clear of that. And usually when we also get these type of questions, we kind of ask the question back. Well, do you believe in something after life? Right? Because it's not about me. It's about you are planning this, or you are preparing for your death. You are actively dying now. Do you believe in something? Like, my opinion really doesn't matter. Yeah. I see another question pop up. What moved me to become a death doula? It was actually, I've always been really fascinated by death and dying. And growing up, it wasn't necessarily part of my upbringing. And it wasn't necessarily stimulated in the way that I was looking for. And the reactions I got from my environment, they were, they made me feel as if I was weird. So I kind of pushed it down for a really long time. And a few years ago, I actually had an astrology reading, and I went to this reading because specific behaviors, particularly around this topic, they kept coming back. And I thought, well, this is weird. Like, why is this? Where is this coming from? So I basically asked this astrologer those questions, and we looked at my chart, and he said, okay, well, I am not surprised at all. You're really meant to be working in this space. And I'd heard of birth doulas before, but not of end-of-life doulas. And it was as if in that reading, I was given a permission slip to explore the field. And I had no idea how I was going to do that, but I just knew, okay, well, I'm not weird. I'm really going to start reading and looking up people and deepening my knowledge about this and stuff. And then stuff just started to pop up. And suddenly I was actually on a little getaway in Tasmania, because I used to live in Australia, which is also where I did my training. And I walked past a children's hospice, and there was a car, and it had end-of-life doula on the door, on the passenger door. I was like, oh my God, that's me. And I'd never heard the term, but I thought, that's me. And then I looked it up, was like, yeah, okay, I'm gonna do this. Yeah, this is what I'm gonna be doing. So it's not just that, it's also having been met with so much resistance and avoidance, and for me, having experienced what it does when we do really embrace this, how much more freely we get to live, and how deeper our connections become. That is something I would love for other people to experience as well. And then there is also this thing where so many people die on their own, and that causes a lot of pain in my heart. So that's another factor that really contributed to me, changing my careers, basically. Yeah. Wow. And yes, very reassuring to know that this job exists. And you know what? I wish it didn't. I wish that we all were, because we all have this in us, right? It's not just me. We all have this innate ability to connect to people in really difficult moments. We all have that. And I really hope that one day we can all fully step into that power, and be the doula for each other, without needing that title. Yeah.
I'm certainly very glad that for now this job does exist and people like you have found their calling, found their gift. To me, you were saying how when you're younger, you just felt like you were maybe a little bit weird, and yet this is so, it should just be seen and treated and felt and talked about as one of the most natural things there is, as it is life. And I can, just from the conversation here, really get a sense of how healing it would be for everyone, really, and community, really, to have more of these conversations. You said right at the beginning, when we started off, one of the issues is that it used to be the village showing up and supporting you in this. And obviously our modern lifestyle here in the West has kind of sort of moved as far away from that as it possibly could have. And so that was probably also one of the reasons I was so delighted to have your meetings and conversations happen at the studio, because it feels like one of the most natural and important things to support building and rebuilding community.
Yeah, and I'm so glad that you see it that way. I'm really, really grateful for that. And I guess what I'd like to add still is death is all around us, right? And it's not just our physical, well, part of our physical body dies every day, like our skin dies every day, all the time. We have our cycle, which is a form of death. So death comes in many, many forms. And I mean, look at nature, look at the cycle of the moon. All of that is death. And I guess once we really start to connect with death on that level and involve children in that as well, that would be just so amazing to open up the conversation. Yeah. And also you said about the community, what I meant to add at the beginning, but forgot. With our aging population, we're going to have a huge influx of deaths coming. And there simply won't be enough space in the hospitals or the nursing homes to host those processes. So people will have to come back to the community and to family homes. So it is really important for us to kind of know what is expected and what could happen and what the process of active dying looks like, so that we can be prepared for that. Yeah.
Marion was also just asking here if you also work with the relatives of someone dying, or just people who are on the grieving end and who have experienced the loss. And I believe you do. And in fact, one of the circles that you hold at the studio is really just that. It's called Untangle. It happens every fourth Monday of the month, not this month because I think it's like Christmas, but then it will pick up again in January. And then the other gathering that happens monthly is Dialogues, where you are talking more about death and dying. That happens every second Monday of the month, and there is still one more meeting of that on the 12th of December. And I really love how it's really for just everyone. It might just be somebody who is curious about death and the conversation, without death being on the doorstep. And really it should be more and more for those people, as we were just talking about, so that this becomes simply something that we talk about and embrace, and becomes more natural and organic again, as it really should be and probably was.
Yeah, very true. And I guess what I like to offer in terms of comfort, if you find it really challenging to start conversation or to kind of let thoughts into your mind, right? Because it can be really overwhelming and scary. So dialogues, I started that probably 18 months ago, and I did quite a lot of sessions online as well. So I had people from different places in Europe and the UK tune in, and there was someone, and I love to always to bring her in as an example, because she's a teen mom. She had her little boy when she was 17. He's now 4, and she joined as one of the first online dialogues, and she was really scared, and she said, I don't know if I should come, but I feel like I would really benefit from it. So we really built her up. She had her camera off first time, did not say anything. She just listened. Next month, she was there again. She went on mute and she contributed. The next time she went on mute and off video. And it was like this really gradual process for her to open up to the conversation. And she messaged me a few months ago to say that her boy, he's now 4, there was a dead bird on the street, and he asked, Mommy, what's happened to the bird? And he got really sad. And she said, I felt so competent in having a conversation with him and explain to him what it is, death, and that not just the birds die, but that people also die. And I mean, that is huge, because that could change his whole trajectory about how he approaches death throughout the rest of his life. That is a huge gift to him. So yeah, it's really beautiful what one conversation can do. It really, really is.
That's a beautiful story, a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And the one thing I just realized I also really wanted to mention is not only your monthly meetings, but we have a workshop coming up, and there it's really specifically about that planning your end. And you spoke about that really already quite a lot, but it just, when you say it out loud, it's just like, yeah, that is such an obvious thing to really get so clear on, and to have a plan no matter what age you are and what stage of dying or not dying you might be. So that's on the 4th of December. And that means in 3 weeks' time or so. I've just posted the link here in the chat for anybody who might want to just open that up and look at it at some point. And also the link to Myrthe's website, fullcycledoula.org. If you want to check out the work that she does or reach out to her, then please do. Or find her at the studio, come along.
Yeah, it would be great. Would be great to see some new faces at the group. Yeah. And if anything comes up from this conversation, and please feel free to just shoot me a message.
So I'm going to send out the recording of this, and sometimes, even though you were here live, these things can be nice to listen to again at another time, and obviously also for those of you who were not able to join us here live. Now, Myrthe, you were saying that you might be able to give some journaling prompts, and I'm just wondering whether maybe we could just send that out in that email as well, then everybody has it and they can get back to it. You to frantically make notes now. And I would also just share the link again for the event in that, so don't worry if you are not able to, if you're joining on your phone and can't get to the link or anything like that, don't worry about that. I will put that in the email as well, so if you wanted to join the workshop on the 4th of December. Myrthe, thank you so much for your time and for making these conversations happen, for having these conversations, for sharing your work and being here and having found your gift, and for your time this evening. Thank you so much.
So much for hosting this and for opening up your beautiful space to allow in new perspectives, I suppose, around the topic. Really appreciative of it. And thank you everyone for coming. It means a lot.
Thank you so much, Kat and Myrthe.
Thank you.
Everyone, enjoy the rest of your evening, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Take care, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.